Hey, it's the Lean Into Artcast, a show where a couple of visual storytellers get together and take on various topics that pop up in and around communicating visually. How do you make stuff? How do you design stuff? How do you think about the people who are going to interact with your stuff? How do you think about organizing your life and your schedule and engaging in trade with various stakeholders and clients and so forth? We think hard about this stuff, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd. I am a cartoonist and teaching artist. The other host is...
Hey, Jerzy, I am Rob Stenzinger, a user experience and game designer.
Good to see you again, Rob. Here we are again, another Thursday night, another Lean Into Artcast. What are we talking about this week?
Well, this is really fun. This comes up every once in a while. We get to dive into some handy exercises from your classroom repertoire, and this is a pretty cool one that I've heard you mention in different ways of like the redesigning, He-Man characters kind of thing, but this is like more tied into our it's almost like a mini series where we have about specifically about comics, where you have an exercise that explores like the ins and outs, the whys and hows of moment choice.
Moment choice, yes, and you alluded to an old thing that I've been doing for years, and anybody who follows me on Instagram has seen. I post updates about this every, I want to say 6 months. We do this exercise in my classrooms. I teach comics classes in Ann Arbor, mostly to youth and teens. But one of the activities that we do is redesigning characters from He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Why? Well, because it's one of my favorite things in the entire world, but also because it's a cartoon franchise that the kids in particular have not had a lot of experience with, because it's kind of old and dated. It hasn't been revived like the way other things have, like Transformers and so on. It has really wild designs in it that are very iconic, and like color schemes that I think are very like that are very vibrant and translate very easily. Like if I show you Beastman's colors on a palette, you'll be able to, and if I put Trapjaw's on a palette, you'll be like, oh yeah, I can tell which one's Beastman. And the storytelling of the cartoon is so vibrant and simple that it becomes a really easy, or rather a really it has a very clear ramp to thinking hard about design elements in character design. And so we watch an episode of the show, and then I ask the kids while they're watching, I say, like, now you're going to write down any character who shows up and you're like, I'm not crazy about that design. You have to ask yourself, what do you think the writers intended? What do you think the artists intended? And how would you punch that up? How would you change it? How would you improve it? Right? And then after they watch the episode, they all sit down and they redesign 1 to 3 characters. And they have to tell me why they chose what they chose. They can't just say like, well, I thought it'd be cooler if Beastman was a tank. Does that match what the intention of the character was, right? So, and I pull up this example that's on my website. It's at comicsaregreat.com/MOTU, where I actually posted like a whole bunch of these designs to show, and I show this to the kids, say like, I don't ask you to do anything I don't do myself. But that is a long way of getting at this idea of what we're doing this week, which is recently in my classrooms, both my youth and my teen classes, I've been doing a variation on that where we take an existing page of comic art, and I try to find comics that the kids probably haven't read before, haven't heard of, because I don't want them to go in with a lot of preconceived notions, right? And they take one of those pages and they have to redesign the page with the same kind of design thinking involved, right? What would you change about the panel layout, the composition, the acting moments? But they have to keep the essential actions exactly the same. They have to keep the dialogue exactly the same. They just got to change the framing and the point of view and the distance and so on, and the composition of the panels themselves. And they can add more panels, but they can't take away. It has to have at least as many panels as you start with. So,
well, yeah, and just to highlight something that I think is really handy, and that
it has to have at least as many panels as you start. I'm sorry, Rob. That was my video preview on the YouTube page. I just
that wasn't me time traveling.
No, that was not.
Like, not again. Okay.
Two jerseys for the price of one. No, that's anyway. Continue.
Well, the thing I was highlighting is that exploring intentionality and thinking of different choices and options with someone else's work, it just, I think, makes this all way more approachable, and it's not so tied into one's own emotions and unboxing like unexplored stuff where it's like, oh, okay, if you, it'd be a wholly different thing, I think, to try to redesign, like, a recent page that you created, right?
Right.
And
yeah, and we'll dig into this deeper in the second half of the show.
right.
But there's also this the approachability. That was the word I was looking for earlier with the He-Man redesign challenge. Is that instead of asking you to come up with your own character from scratch and think about these design constraints, let's reverse engineer somebody else's thinking and see how we'd improve upon it. So yes, you're not distracted by having to come up with the clever idea. Now you're evaluating somebody else's idea and seeing where you would take it from there. So yeah, it's sort of like to use a bowling metaphor, putting the bumpers up on the lane a little bit, making it a little bit safer and more approachable to start thinking hard about these ideas. So that said, you ready
or
to
like
go?
learning someone else's song, right? Doing a cover of someone else's music, same thing.
Great,
even if you're just learning
analogy.
one part of one instrument, you're like, now you're just experiencing someone else's choices and finding your own way through.
I couldn't have put it better. All right, so with that, do you want to hit the music and head on over to On the Ground?
Sounds awesome. Let's jump into this thing.
Okay, well, let me find one of my theme songs that can actually play. Well, since we're talking about He-Man. All right, so now we are in the first section of the show. I'm going to have to do a screen share to do this. I'm going to actually demo this activity for the first section, and then the second section of the show we'll sort of unpack what we did and why. Like, why do this exercise at all? So the comic that I'm going to redesign today is a page from the Saga of Crystar, Crystal Warrior. Ever heard of this one, Rob?
I totally haven't.
See, that's good.
It seems familiar-ish because of, just those elements remind me of comics in my youth, but like I don't recognize any character or anything about this.
This is a very short-lived toy line that Marvel did a comic series about. It had some pretty interesting ideas in it. These crystal people and lava people, and then there's like this
okay, I think I have seen the toys. Maybe that's okay.
But it's another one of those things where it hasn't been reinterpreted or updated in recent times. So it's a fair bet that my 12-year-old students have not heard of this comic. So this is one of the ones that I brought to class for them to reinterpret. By the way, I should say that the art in this issue is by Brett Blevins. I am not going to be so presumptuous as to say that I can improve on Brett Blevins' artwork because he is amazing. But I'm going to interpret his work in my own voice, if that makes sense. And then we'll walk through it together while I go. And I'm counting on you, Rob, to provide some color commentary since, for the folks who are listening in audio. Okay.
Yeah. I will be commentating as I see you go through this exercise. Looks like you're in Metabang, by the way, right?
Oh no, this is Clip Studio Paint.
It's Clip Studio Paint. Gosh, those things. So
they're looking a lot alike, and actually, Clip Studio just released an update today, which had like some things which I'm pretty sure they borrowed from Metabang, or at least took a cue from Metabang.
Okay.
So let's walk through the essential action of the scene. We've got like 3 crystal warriors up against a wall. Some like flaming lava dudes are coming at them. We'll take care of the pretty crystal men. You will now. Let's see you do it. And the crystal heroes strike out against them. Guy with an eye patch is like, if you can, which I doubt. And then we got 3 panels at the bottom of the page where each of the crystal warriors is fighting the lava men on their own, and they're kind of talking about how cool it is to be crystal or made of glass, as they say, because they don't get burned by the crystal men or the lava men. So there's our page.
You could microwave your own soup in your hand.
I suppose you could, yeah. So I'm going to pull up a blank page now. Now, with only 20 some odd minutes to do this, I am not going to do a magnificent job that,
If this won't be fully rendered, come on.
Yes, my wife is not
20
putting this
minutes.
on the fridge when I am done.
Okay. No, this
Um,
is okay. Fair enough. Good to set expectations. That
yes, please manage your expectations. And I'm
okay.
going to just put in approximate sizes of the word balloons rather than copy the lettering. Because what I had my students do is they were actually doing lettering on the boards with an Ames lettering guide, which some
Ooh.
of them took to right away, and some of them were like, "Oh, this sucks." Let's go ahead and pull up now. First of all, would I do anything different with the composition of the panel composition?
Mhm. It's yeah,
I
it
got
is
it.
an interesting. It's so parallel. First horizontal, then vertical.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a calm layout
It does feel like a
for
calm
how
layout, doesn't it?
intense it is of the subject matter is.
And you know what? I think we could alleviate that. Well, let me grab my shape tool here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can make some panels real quick. We could make it a little bit more exciting. If I mangify that second panel. Well, mangify also 90s Image Comics.
Oh, sure.
Defy that second panel.
You did manga this quite a bit. It's in the beat and the rhythm of those. It's almost like, half note, triplet. Dotted eighth, where it's dun 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 dun, right?
Yeah, we haven't talked about that in the show in a while, have we? Is like the intrinsic beats that that images have. At least like
Mhm.
a way that I like to think about it in class is like if we look at this first panel, which is a narrower panel, this might be 1 to 1.5 beats. One half, and then which would make the second panel have maybe 3 to 3.5, right?
Mhm.
1/2, 1, 2, 3/2, right? And then what we put inside them changes that rhythm as well. This is by no means, I don't have a paper written on this that is like, this is not academic work. This is just like a metaphor I like to use to think about how images portray a little bit of
What you're slicing up
implied.
space and time with
Sure.
panels. So
Yeah.
it's not. I don't have a thesis on this either, but I do think, I mean, as we've discussed before, and I mean, it could have been you that got me thinking more about this, because just you're dividing up moments, and very much like you divide up moments in making music.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've chosen some. Yeah, you're going a really different route now. So you've got.
Yeah, I am. And
Yeah.
I originally was thinking that those bottom three panels need to be of equal size, but now I'm not so sure because there's different amounts of dialogue in each of those panels.
Right.
And plus, I don't want to. One thing I do like about this particular original page is the top half being horizontal, the bottom half being vertical. Well, now that I've made the top half more vertical, I feel like I want to make the bottom half more horizontal.
Mm.
Okay, so now I presented myself with a problem. I need to show our three heroes in peril with these lava men converging around them. And I knew the moment I saw this page, one of the first things I was going to do to change up the way it feels. Let's get the balloon in there. And then second balloon there. So there's one and there's two. I don't know how well you can see the original page in my preview pane over here, but
It's a good little thumbnail. We can follow.
okay.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would do is get tighter on our bad guys converging on our heroes.
Oh.
Like so, and I would put our heroes. Whoops, let's get these. Matter of fact, let's go.
Wow, this interesting direction I'm seeing you do. So you have this sort of framing of the heroes in the outstretched, threatening, grabby, reachy arms of the baddies, right? And and the angle of the panel and the angle of your camera direction, because it's like it's a lot more intense. This feels like you almost got you're really glimpsing in on some trouble.
Right.
From his
I
point of
brought
view.
the bad guys closer to our point of view,
Yeah.
and they're almost like in silhouette as they're so close to us. And then their arms are curling around as they're kind of lumbering forward, and it's forming a circle. Two of the bad guys' arms are forming sort of a circle, like an iris that's like opening up to our three heroes who are backed up against the wall. So the heroes are more centered in the shot now, and our villains are more abstracted. So now if we're going to have them leaping out in the second one and beating up, punching up the bad guys, you can see this original one, Brett Blevins was really, I feel like he was, I'm going to do a little reverse engineering here, which we can unpack a little bit in the second half of the show, but I'm inferring that he was trying to solve a problem of blocking, showing the relationship of the spatial relationship of the characters. I feel like we can get away with a little bit more confusion. So I'm going to borrow a technique from Eric Larson and Sal Buscema. It's one of my favorite. I mean, if you're going to do punch 'em up violence in your comic, my favorite shots to do is this one.
This is the punched off your feet.
Yeah, tumbling backward shot. And let's Lava Man's expression in there. And instead of looking like Brett Blevins had us looking down into the shot, I'm going to have us looking up. And we'll do Chris Starr doing his the Sal Buscema crossbody punch, one of my favorite poses. And I'm going to angle that more. And let's see, we got like the guy with the eye patches doing some crossbow work. And let's do another monster here, because we got a lot of negative space to use here. Look at all this negative space we've got to work with. So, put crossbow guy here, going twang against this guy.
Yeah, it's almost like you have this cropping of the different characters that still is creating this very zoomed in, more personal point of view.
Yeah, and so here's this guy
in the middle of the action, which it's not the above the overhead perspective, which feels a little bit more you're more removed.
Right. Yes. Yes. I planned on talking about this more too. I got some other examples that I use in my classroom where it's like, yes, when you're looking down at a shot, especially when you're far away, it tends to have like a security camera kind of viewing angle, which, while you can do exciting stuff like Brett Blevins, very few people can draw a cool action hero like he can, but it still feels a little bit you're removed from the scene. Whereas like if I put us on ground, on the ground level and tilt the shot sideways a little bit, right? Suddenly it feels a little bit more energetic. Okay, so now we've got these three guys performing actions against the villains. They're all just like punching them while they're contemplating how cool it is to be crystal people. Oh, I forgot my word balloons. So let's go, my word balloons in panel 2. So let's put one here. And the second one here, because this is also about like thinking about the composition of the balloon spotting, right? How are we going to read? What's the reading direction going to be, right? Let me do that in red so we can see that again. So if we go right, so we want to go like this, probably is my guess. That's what my intuition is telling me, which is like going to bottom of panel 1, right? Top of panel 2, bottom of panel 2, and then zigzagging through 3, 4, and 5.
It's almost like there's a sharpened question mark through the page with like an extra hook on the top of it, just describing your anticipated balloon spotting.
Okay, so
I'm
going to bust. Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm going to bust up the next panel's dialogue into 2 balloons because we're a little short on space. And so here's our hero. Now we're getting really tight on him, right? Because we've already seen his whole body here and here in panels 1 and 2. So it's like we can get tighter on him now and show him whacking that guy across the face. Um, and the second one, I really like how the eye patch guy is like lifting that poor lava dude over his shoulder while felling another one. So this one, let's see, what kind of viewing flow do I want? We're drawing the eye this way, right? We're this panel 3. We're drawing the eye to the right, so I want to go back this way to the left and then back to the right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Again, that's what my intuition is saying. So, how about
it's like you're creating this chain of gazing from linking just sort of natural reading direction to start out, and then where one panel ends to have a fairly natural place to pick up reading on the next panel.
Here's our crossbow guy firing, and oh, you just murdered a lava man. Some hero you are, but oh well, it's a fantasy story. So, and here's our lava guy.
He's grappling and shooting at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Right? Because if you look at the original panel, I mean, I'm amping up the poses for the most part, but I think what makes that second to last panel with the eye patch guy firing a crossbow and lifting up a lava man with his arm is it does look very casual, right? He's doing this effortlessly. So, and we'll put this balloon here.
No big deal.
Yeah. And then finally, this like landing on the lava guy's back. Chris starts jumping down like whomp. So, and we'll do one of these lava guys like, Chris stars like this.
Nice, yeah, a lot of foreshortening with the lava character reaching out.
Yep, and here's Chris Star landing on his back. So, does that read? Do I need to clear this up at all? Should I like touch it up, or do you think that this?
I mean, that was like watching a magic trick. Seriously,
you're very kind.
The quality of the balloon spotting on this draft and the legibility of the poses, the camera angles. It's honestly, I'm disgusted.
Never took a lesson in my life, Rob. No, but let's double check the reading direction just to be on the safe side. So like we're gonna start at panel 1, and we're gonna guide our eye right through that iris to the second balloon at the bottom of panel 1, up to this next balloon here, which will guide our eye across there and take us through all this action to this balloon, bridging us. Ooh, that's a problem. You see what I did there?
Yep, you are connecting to the second word balloon most naturally. Instead of the first.
Aha. So we found a problem. So now what I would do then is I would put black ink again. My first balloon would go, I've got an eraser on, that's why. First balloon would go here, and I'd connect it with a trunk there. And actually this works even better now. Now we're talking, because watch what happens. Is now we go from here to the action across to this balloon.
Oh my gosh.
And that's going to take us right to that balloon, to this action, to this balloon, to there. That
wow.
was not good audio.
We had a lot of from here to there to there to there. But it's the okay. So what I think is really wild, unpacking just for a minute, for the audio, is the first panel. You've got the anchoring of a balloon in the beginning and a balloon at the end, and across the really strongly framed, those arms reaching, and it's so threatening, and it's like, gosh, that panel is a really great layout. And then back to a natural reading direction to the panel that's to its immediate right, where again in these linking, it's a combination of, you have this harmony between the framing in the panel pulling you in, the poses that where the characters are communicating with their actions, and then the word balloons are again in harmony with all of this, and they're not it's not like an aside. It's like this is just something that I know I need to grow with a lot in my comics work, and just seeing you do this is incredibly helpful, where knowing that the importance of reading the word balloons is just this high priority visual anchor to go, okay, I reset, I go to the next balloon, but then having it be an efficient next step seems to be what you achieved here. It's not, where's that thing? Where do I have to go? And then I have to ignore something as I glance across and, tolerate this inefficient layout. There's just a lot of efficiency and harmony and reinforcement of all these different elements. So again, linking step by step as the reader would be gazing through. So
Yeah, I mean, like word balloons in a very real sense are like the UI of the comic, right? I mean, they're well, they're not the UI. They're a very noticeable and entry point UI for the comic.
yeah, because it's layering, it's a layer of information on top of the like what's happening visually, just without any words, without any hints of comic symbols, and um that, well, let's see, there can be it all works together, right? So you've got the subject matter in their composition, you've got the action, the lines of action, and the ways that you can hint and draw the eye with well, vibration lines, action lines, onomatopoeia, stuff like that, which this doesn't have a lot of actual explicit audio or sound.
That's kind of a bummer. As I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, I would have liked to try to redesign some of those sounds. There are no sound effects in this comic strip.
Yeah, I mean, the fire could be crackling on the lava men. There's a lot of opportunity for like that layer of information to work in too. Anyway, yeah,
yeah, we can see even in the original, the balloon spotting is pretty darn good.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's they were pros. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, they're at like anchor points, and they're like bringing you through a panel instead of making you do two jobs basically as a reader to say,
yeah,
where am I supposed to go next? And wait a minute, I didn't catch what was happening as I was reading it. Now I have to go back and reread and whatever, which may happen naturally, but like, I don't know. It really does. This is something I think would be fascinating to have some data on. It is sort of the effects of legibility in comics and like reader enjoyment, comprehension, stuff like that.
Yeah, I only have anecdotal data because I'm just a guy who's read a lot of comics.
You have expertise. You've obviously among yourself and peers and reading work like Understanding Comics, which is a fantastic resource to really get into the elements and how they could work together in an intentional way, but not prescriptive.
Right. And yeah, and then amongst my peers, there's like best practices and things like that, but that's all stuff that is highly subject to depends on who you're talking to. I have friends who like swear like you just don't cross balloon tails. You just don't do it. It's unacceptable. But then I've seen people pull it off for effect or because it's just part of their style, and it's like it works fine. Like there's people who have done it. So anyway, but yes, this would be the kind of thing where I would love to see some actual studies done on legibility and like heat mapping some pages to see like how the balloons affect that. Okay, well, did we go through the first half? Is it time to take a break?
Yeah, this is perfect timing, and I'm really curious. Like those of the leaners listening on, to the audio version of this, I'd be really curious to hear how it's going for you.
Well, I'm exporting it as a JPEG right now, so I can include it in the show notes as well, so people can just look at the image that as it was finished.
Fantastic.
All right.
Well,
how about in about a minute and 30 seconds, we'll talk about like, well, what kind of things do we stand to learn from engaging with an activity like this? I think we kind of walked through it a little bit when we were doing it live, but I mean, it's worth digging into. Like, why investigate someone else's work in your own voice, and how does what realms of concerns in visual storytelling does an exercise this like this raise for you, make you more aware of. But before we do that, we got to thank some people who make this show possible, Rob. We do.
I would love to do that.
In order to, in order to do it right, we got to pull up the screen so I can thank the people who support us on Patreon. Yes, patreon.com/leanintoart is where you can find it. And what is it? It's a crowdfunding campaign. It's a way to give us a monthly upvote to say, like, hey, Jerzy, Rob, I believe in you guys. I believe in the work that you do. I get a lot of value out of it. So here's $1 a month or whatever you can afford a month. We want to thank 5 people who've been doing exactly that. First, I want to thank Mike White. Mike White, you can find on Instagram at FE Follies. He posts comics directly to Instagram, so you can follow FE Follies to read them. Jesse Kaufman, longtime friend of the show, been on the show at least once or twice, and good friend personally as well. Thank you, Jesse, for believing in us. You can find Jesse on Twitter at Jesse Kaufman. Also, once again, we have to thank the mysterious K for supporting this show. We don't know who you are, but we really appreciate the fact that you believe in us and support us. Thank you so much, Kay. And then Shawnee Redfearn, and you can find Shawnee on Twitter at Shawnee Redfearn, Fearn. Thank you, Shawnee. And finally, Brandon Dayton at Brandon Dayton on Twitter. Brandon just dropped a really awesome, he's been doing these YouTube essays, and he just dropped a new one about dealing with depression as an artist, and it's really sincere and heartfelt, and I think it finds the utility in what some people might call a shortcoming. I encourage you to check it out. Follow him on Twitter at Brandon Dayton. You can join all those great people at leanintoart.com, or rather, patreon.com/leanintoart, where you'll find all the shows that we make, including the extra leans, the shows we record just for leaners once a month. And those posts become an open mic post where you can contribute whatever you want in terms of conversation, and it's a safe place where only fellow leaners hang out. So thanks, everybody, for supporting us once again at patreon.com/leanintoart.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Your support means a lot to us.
All right, let's find some music for the second half of the show. I've been leaning on Dragon Ball a lot, so I'm just gonna do another He-Man one.
Dance for me, Rob. Dance.
I need to get some of the other Dragon Ball themes in there is what I need to do, so I can cycle through a couple different things. All right. So, what are we talking about for this part?
Okay. I mean, digging into this, more about the benefits and the whys of this exercise and unpacking it more. Some things came up naturally during your actual performance of it and sharing the example. But let's unpack it more. What do you get as a benefit of doing this exercise with your students, and what benefit do you see them getting from it?
So I suppose I could start by saying what it is that I'm asking the students to consider. We just demoed this, but in the classroom, I would have spent about 5 to 10 minutes reviewing what moment choice means in comics, asking the students some questions as to evaluate some examples on the board. And I really break it down for them in terms of, as you investigate this page, if you're not sure what to look for, here are some things to look for. These are things I want you to be concerned with or aware of, or look at as a point of investigation into the page. And let me see if I can find my... Oh, I have a that's for my presentation with Dan Michigan. I have an example here. It's storytelling. I'm going to do another screen share, and I'll bring up what I mean. Here we go. You see this okay?
I do.
Storytelling strategies. So, in class we look at a 2-page spread from an old comic I did worked on with Sarah Turner back in 2005 called The Replacements. And in this sequence, there's a lot of different viewing angles, right? When we have this guy signing autographs, and then this big dude shows up and is starts verbally attacking him. And I asked the students on page 1, and the first time we see that big guy, how does this moment feel? Well, it feels really intimidating. Why? Well, we're looking up at him. Aha! When you look up at things versus when you look down at things, it changes the way the moment feels, right? What about when on page 2, when we just show his eyes? Why would we get so close to his eyes? Well, the kids say, "Oh, we were really identifying with his pain. We're looking and we're seeing. You don't even need to see his whole face, as long as you can see like how twisted up his eyes are, how like the lower lids are pulled up. You know, we can feel like this guy's like actually hurting when he's verbally abusing this old guy." And what about that bottom left panel on page 2? How does that feel? Oh, he feels trapped. Why does he feel trapped? I don't know. We got to think about it. Oh, look, the guy's arms are framing up the shot in the foreground, and the balloons are all converging around the old man's face, right? So he gives the appearance of him feeling trapped, even though he's not literally trapped. Like we can use visual adjectives in our storytelling, right? And like we were talking about this earlier, Rob, when you look down on this classroom, this is the same shot or the same moment, right? It's kids in a classroom. But when we look down on it, it feels one way. But then when we look at it from the angle of as if you're sitting in one of the desks, now you're in the scene, right? So the thing I think about is like, when should we focus on the characters? When should we focus on the setting, right? When is one of those two things important? Also, as I was describing earlier, distance, point of view, viewing angle. Like how can we make those moments feel more of how we want them to feel? If we want to feel calmer, farther away, more, on the horizontal. If we want it to feel more intense, we get closer, maybe pitch it at an angle, maybe look up at it. Gesture, right? How can we use body language more effectively to communicate what we want? Like in the case of those glass men fighting the lava monsters, well, this is clearly supposed to be something that's very exciting to 12-year-olds. Fantasy, action, and adventure. Well, can we amp up the body language even more to make it more exaggerated? Like, can I, instead of having the lava monster just getting hit and sort of stumbling backwards, can I have the guy flying backwards, right? And then, as I was talking about with that example with the guy framed up in the shot with the guy in the foreground with his arms, and like what I did with those lava men with their arms curling around our heroes, this composition. How can we use like the context of the elements to frame what we want to frame? How can we use composition of the page itself so that we can like create a sturdy, what do I want to say, a resilient reading flow, right? So that would be something what I would front end in a classroom. And like as people are listening to this that they want to take it on, I would say write down distance, point of view, viewing angle, gesture, and composition. And how would you reinvent the page using those criteria?
And so does that help you unbox the overall goal and intention of the different panels as you're going through that? So then do you end up sharing that goal? If so, do you end up sharing it, or do you end up maybe using that as a jumping off point for inserting your own? Right.
Explain what you mean. I'm not sure I'm following.
Well, let's see, because it's almost like if you compare like the page as it existed for your example that you walked through in the beginning segment, you had there's a lot of different style choices that were like your interpretation was very different, right? So is that interpretation in part adding, maybe it's not changing by omitting and getting rid of the original storytelling goals, but like you seem to have layered on a lot more intentions and maybe goal isn't the right word or whatever, but like if you think about like the information that's being conveyed in the panel, like sort of objectively the facts, but then you have the feelings, and and also multiple ways to encode those facts and feelings. Like your interpretation, like really went, a different angle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
yeah, and as far as intention goes, I mean, like, yes, I'm thinking about all those things as I go. I'm thinking about them all at the same time, right? I would say that if I were to describe my thinking process, and this is a not very trustworthy narrator because I'm sort of reporting it after the fact, and you're
unboxing your own things, but we're blind. We all have blind spots and biases.
I would say that it's sort of like, imagine turning a radio dial and like getting one frequency more clear versus getting another station more clear, like sort of going back and forth. Like, okay, now I can hear the intention of composition more clearly. Now I can hear the intention of gesture more clearly, right? But imagine that dial turning very rapidly back and forth, like like left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. I'm listening to like little snippets of both at the same time. They're not happening necessarily in parallel that I can detect, but I'm sort of thinking back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But also, I mean, the speed that you saw it happen is because I've drawn a lot of comics pages, and so I've got a lot of sort of stock. Like I was saying, like, oh, here's the Selby Summer crossbody punch. I don't know how many times I've used that, right? It's something I'd picked up on a long time ago when I was reading his comics. I'm like, I am stealing that because I love it. It's great, and I'm use that as much as I can. So they become sort of like assets that you can just dip into. Like, it'd be great here, a Selby Summer crossbody punch. That might not be the best solution, right? That could even be potentially a blind spot for me down the road, in that I'm overlooking a more effective solution because I'm leaning on my asset bag, right?
Well, I mean, that is like those rules of thumb, heuristics, patterns. That's part of your language. That's part of your style, and that's, I mean, that makes sense that that it comes through no matter like where you're at. You happen to have a very developed and large bag of those elements and techniques, right? So let's see. And then, yeah, I guess, so that's funny. So then the different intentionality may not even be saying, oh, I have an idea that I want to steer this in a different direction. It could be just the interpretation because of your own familiarities with different techniques, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, idiosyncrasies of your creative voice and whatnot.
So and then that's, I mean, it's part intentional, part incidental then.
Yes, I would say very much so. And the reason I do this in my classroom is more or less to demonstrate to the students that there is a realm of skills that you have to hone beyond the coming up with the cool idea, beyond writing the plot, right? I would say the plot of the page is what we're leaping off of, right? That Chris Start page that we looked at, that there's plot, guys getting attacked by lava men. Now, how do we approach the narrative? So how do we make this plot have feelings in it, and what feelings are important to you? Because like a different artist, so let's say Brett Blevins looks at my interpretation, he'd be like, why are you shouting in every panel, Jerzy? Like, because it's an action scene. Okay, well, let's un-Michael Bay this just by like 10%, right? Whereas another artist might do it like much more withdrawn and calm, and maybe even like give it like a dour feeling, where it's like, this isn't something to be celebrated. These glass men are horrible monsters in that they are ruthlessly dispatching lava men in this way, right? You could find ways to do those moment choices and have it have a totally different tone, right? And for the purposes of the exercise, I would say that all means or all methods are perfectly valid in that case. This isn't about like trying to make a value judgment on what's the right interpretation of this plot. It's just interpret it, right?
Without too many constraints, it sounds like. I mean, the constraints you mentioned have the same amount of panels or more, but no less, and then you retain the same
Dialogue.
the dialogue. There you go. So the content of the word balloons at least must be retained, but then they could be reshaped or re-rhythmed. Like you divided up the dialogue in like what, panel 4 or
absolutely, yes. And re-rhythmed is a great description, because you could say, like in an example I've used on the show before, is like you could have a balloon where somebody says, "Will you just go?" versus "Will, new balloon, you, new balloon, just new balloon, go," right? Which changes you could, so like you could, if you wanted to give the thing a more dour or more tragic feeling, you could play with that rhythm of words a little bit more to stretch things out. Add more panels to stretch things out, right? So when that guy's wrestling with the lava guy over his shoulder and casually dispatching with his crossbow, make that happen in like 4 panels instead of 1, right? That slows everything down. Or add like a heap more detail in that one. That'll slow everything down too. So that's part of the fun of the exercise. But I mean, and another part of it is that then you have a, you have an easy means, especially if you're doing this on your own, you have an easy means of evaluating what you did because you have contrast, right? Here's the original, here's what I did, versus making my own page. Is this good? I don't know. I know what my intentions were, I guess, I think. Did I get there? I don't know. Hard to say. But if you do this with pre-existing art, now you can go, here's A, here's B. Better like this or better like this, right?
It's like
Um,
it's a particular workout. Like you're like it's almost like uh isolating one muscle group from from another
mm,
where
yeah,
yeah, I mean you're the like why use pre-existing art is a question you have in the notes here, and it's like you don't have to deal with like just the unboxing the big ball of stuff that is your style and narrative and plot, and it's I mean, that is an interesting exercise too. I imagine there could be a lot of benefit to redrawing pre-existing work. But then if the work wasn't a complete comic page to begin with, then like working from a script alone feels like you're not isolating these particular skills that
mm-hmm, right.
that's seems to be pretty straightforward with how you've structured this.
Right, I think another benefit of doing this that at least I infer from it is you baked into the exercise is you have to or you are invited to um, guess at what kind of problems the other artist was trying to solve. So like early on when I was talking about panel 2, I'm like, well, I think here Brett Blevins was worried about blocking and staging. He wanted to give us a clear sense of where all these characters were in relation to one another because he was about to get tighter in the following shots. So in order to alleviate any confusion, here's one nice looking 3/4 down shot to be able to tell where everybody is with relation to one another. That's what
Well,
I think he was going for.
and what a positive design exercise too, to sort of see how someone else went through their own choices and their resulting output, and to say like, what is this really good at doing? And
Mm-hmm.
that probably is what they were intending, is sort of finding the strengths of the like how the choices add up. Like what is being communicated very clearly here? What is being emphasized versus what's not? Like we did
And
notice there's
I
no
do have to
there's
spend a
no
lot of
sound
time.
other than the
Yeah,
bird
well,
noise.
we didn't notice that until at the end, right? Um, and I do have to spend a little bit of time with some of my younger students, making it clear that this is about interpretation, not improvement, right? Because there's a few who I'll ask, well, why did you do it this way? Well, because the way they did it sucked. Well, did it? Let's look at it again. You just said a Steve Ditko page sucks, and I'm not so sure I agree with you on that one. So let's look at it again and see if what he did really sucks, or if you just had a different way of looking at it. And so the reason I bring this into the discussion is just to like sort of reemphasize that idea of like, yeah, this is about um, you lending your voice and using really strong material as a very accessible way to get started. A lot of choices have been eliminated for you, so now you can focus really hard on this narrower band of choices. I don't know.
That
Is there anything
yeah, that
else to say about
I,
them?
I like this exercise a lot. I think I need to do this at some regimen.
um,
So
yeah, I think it'd be worth it to like if you go to like a local comic store and just like dig through like if they have back issue bins, like especially like cheap bins, and you can find something you've never heard of. One, you get introduced to a comic you never heard of, which is always a good thing. And two is yeah, it becomes like sort of fresh material for you to add your interpretation to. Um,
yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, the cheap bins in like US comic stores are, I mean, you can get a lot for very little money. I mean, it's
mhm.
typically like maybe 25 cents an issue,
Sometimes, yeah.
you know.
Yeah, like even in like I found some back issue bins in like used bookstores and stuff. You can get them even cheaper then.
Oh wow.
Um, but and I mean, and you've got some good bookstores in your town, Rob. I bet you'd be able to find some. Um, but yeah, go to your local comic store, or you could even just do like a search on eBay and find some old back issues of old books, right?
Yeah, I bet. That's a good idea.
Reasonable.
and so like I know we're naturally kind of coming to the end of this section, right? And then I
Mhm.
see this thing. Do I get to ask you this thing
If you
in the
want,
notes? I do.
I put it there as a like, if this is intriguing, let's hit it. Otherwise, if you have a different final thought, Rob, you can go where you
Like,
want with that. But
okay. So I want to understand that. So I'm just stunned that I thought there was like a lot of secrecy and like who, like can't talk about it, but like, okay. So evidently, I mean, you're working on a comic with Zach Gilango, right?
oh yeah, that's right. I shushed you last week about
You
this,
did
didn't I?
just last week. And it's like, shit, no, quiet you. And I thought, well, okay.
To be fair, you were hinting at drop date, and I'm not so sure about drop date. That's the thing. I mean, like, yes,
All right, fine.
the cat's already been let out of the bag that I'm working on something with Zach because he's been sharing preview images, and I've shared a few preview images on my Patreon and I think on Instagram stories. But
Oh
so
yeah.
that's
Okay. Good.
it's no secret
Fair
that we're doing so anyway. But yeah, when it ships, not sure yet. But yes, we had an experience where we've been having these dialoguing sessions where we thumbed out the book together, taking turns at different passes, and now we're sitting down and looking at the thumbnails, and we're like, okay, what are they saying here? Like, we know what they're saying, right? We got the plot part. What's the narrative part? How do we get the character to say this as only this character could say this? What's the conversation that's happening between the characters while they're performing this specific plot action, that kind of thing. And it's been a laugh riot doing this, like working on the dialogue with Zach, because there's just like a lot of really bad jokes getting left on the floor, but us laughing the whole time while we're doing it. But we hit on this one panel. We hit on this one panel where it's like, should we do it this way or that way? And in the end, we decided, nope, this way is the best way because comics is so darn good at showing before, middle, and after all at the same time. We get hung up on this notion of static images in deliberate sequence, to quote Scott McCloud, which suggests, or it can be interpreted as to mean that you are showing individual discrete actions per panel. Each panel is one action. However, panels can have more than that, and I have an example of that Zach and I kind of tripped upon, and I just thought, like, this is just such a great distillation of when you put all of those concerns that we've been talking about earlier together, the kinds of moments you can find in comics. It's not, nobody is going to fall out of their chair on this one, but I
Well,
do feel like
I can't wait to see this example, right?
yeah,
And also, I want to see how you do this. Where this is a thing I over leverage. One could say it's where I abuse the idea of the super moment versus the single moment, right? The super moment where lots of stuff can happen in a panel, and I'm like, I haven't really worked out as much of the interpretation of these story beats, and I'm just trying to crank through this draft of a comic. And so, like, I'll just chain together a bunch of super moments that I think if you do that too much, then things don't land, right?
Right. It can feel very squished together if you do it all the time. And believe me, if you go back and look at my Antarctic Press work, it's loaded with a lot of that. A lot of me like going like, hey, how about 12 super moments? So you get like maximum story per page. Well, yes, but there's a reason that we don't just. Yeah, well, yeah, and to which you could reply like, well, all you've done now is just given us the Slurpee with just the syrup and not the ice, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need it's too much. Then, but okay, so how about that for final thought? I'm going to demonstrate something that Zach and I kind of fell upon, and it's something I think we should consider more often when we're making our comics. But before we do that, we've got to thank some more people who make this show possible. Those people happen to be me and you, Rob. We make this show possible. We make the show.
we do, and we do.
And we also announced ourselves as visual storytellers, and I said that I'm a cartoonist and teaching artist, and I just did a bunch of examples from my teaching work. Well, how about the stuff that I make? And the thing I want to remind you of that I make is called Science Comics Rockets, Defying Gravity. It's out June 12th, 2018. It's a comics documentary I made with my wife, Anne. And what is it about? It's about the history and science of rockets. Like, where do rockets come from? Who did the inventing? And how do they even work? I mean, why do they work in a vacuum? Because if it's pushing on something, it's pushing on the air, right? Well, maybe it's pushing on something else when a rocket pushes, right? When you're in the International Space Station, are you weightless because you're in space, or is it because of something else? Turns out it's something else. So you're going to learn about Newton's laws of motion. You're going to learn about how rockets work. But oh no, is it all just learning? No, because it's also narrated by a bunch of funny animals who are all involved in rocket history. So you also learn like a whole bunch of like esoterics. Little known facts. So you can be like Cliff Clavin at the bar saying, "Oh, it's a little known fact that it wasn't Apollo 8 wasn't the first living creatures from Earth to orbit the moon. It was actually 2 Russian tortoises." And that's you'll learn stories like that and more in Science Comics Rockets, available now for pre-order on Amazon or in Previews Magazine. And you'll be able to also get it at A2CAF this spring, June 12th.
Can't wait. Rob, that's so awesome.
Rob, you make a game.
I do, and it's called This Panda Needs You. And well, here you are, like, a person likely with a mobile device or a tablet or a desktop computer, and you're like, I need to chill out a little bit. I would like to solve some puzzles while I chill out. And that's pretty much what the kind of promise that This Panda Needs You delivers on, where you're helping out this cute little panda that's cruising through a little bamboo forest and encounters these simple, they start out simple, stacks of shapes that, you have these physics and pattern based puzzles where, different colors of blocks, squares and rectangles and triangles and all that stacked in different ways that get, again, start really easy, but then through over 50 levels get progressively more and more difficult. And well, what's difficult is that the stack of blocks is fine when the panda first shows up, but then this little cloud comes along, blows wind, knocks everything down, and that's when you come in and help out this panda. So it's, as I mentioned, it's available on phones and tablets, so mobile, which is on the iOS and also Android OS. Then it's also for your Mac and Windows desktop. For Mac and Windows, go to itch.io and search for This Panda Needs You, and then go to your, of course, iTunes or Google Play for your appropriate platform. Anyway, that's it.
And if you do purchase it, or if you have purchased it and you haven't yet, giving the game a review on whatever platform you purchased it would be immensely helpful to helping more people find it. Same thing if you've pre-ordered Rockets, telling people that you did would also be. I would be super grateful.
Definitely, yeah. Go to Goodreads and all that stuff. I mean, you got to spread the word about that Rockets book.
All right, but if you're here because you really mostly enjoy the way we think about stuff, our teaching stuff, like if you're like, hey, Jerzy, your classroom activities sound really awesome, I would love to. I wish I could participate in one of your classes. Well, hey, guess what? leanintoart.com/workshops, where you can download a whole bunch of different self-contained workshop classes, videos. You can download at a price of your choosing, even free. You can get it for free right now at leanintoart.com/workshops. You don't have to sign up for any mailing list or anything like that. You don't have to fill out a form. You just click the thing and get it. Well, I guess it does collect your email address, doesn't it, Rob? Because it's through Gumroad. But it's not something where you're going to get a whole bunch of emails afterwards, right?
Yeah, I hope you get more emails than you currently have received, because honestly, I super appreciate that, and those of you that have downloaded Jerzy's workshops through that, and also mine as well. And honestly, that's something we could get a little better at, is reaching out and saying hey, guess what? There's something going on. And then, of course, there would be ways through those email mechanisms. There's typically something in the footer to say, don't send me these, or, that kind of thing. Anyway, little bit of extra marketing is good, but
yeah, sure. But I'm just saying, like a lot of times when you hear oh, you can download it for free on a website, it's you get there and it's oh, but you got to fill out this form giving us a whole bunch of information about you before you can get the thing. And it's oh, okay,
no, it's not onerous, and it's not grabby or creepy about data stuff. It's just an email address.
You need an email address so you can get the download link to the thing. But yes, you can download them for free, but if you get some value out of it, a great thing you could do is come back and then purchase it. It's like giving us a tip for the value that we brought to you. And you can always, purchase it for a friend. That's a nice thing to do. Hey, I got something out of this. Maybe you will too. If you're watching this video on YouTube right now, giving it a thumbs up helps more people find the show. And if you're listening to this on a podcatcher, whatever kind of podcast app you use, giving the show a 5-star rating helps more people find the show too. We thank everybody who's been doing just those things. It means a lot to us.
It really does. Thank you.
All right.
Hmm.
Time for final thought. Let me do some screen sharing again. Ready?
Yeah, let's do this. I want to
All right. So
see
more
this
live
thing that
drawing.
you and Zach are working on.
Well, it's not going to give away
Oh,
that
you're
much.
going through the steps in this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
So
interesting.
yeah, I'm actually going to
So
sketch out like the character poses live.
okay,
We
great.
won't
So
know who these characters are.
oh man.
Well,
Okay,
sorry.
fair enough. So it's a tiny, not that much of a reveal, but fair enough. There we're seeing like wow, there's a character on the right side of a panel. It's a very vertically oriented panel, that's doing a bit of looking a little bit intense and reaching toward a character on the left side of the panel. They're both just sort of leaning into the panel, not fully
Mm-hmm.
standing there, right? So it's a lot of energy, two angles coming in at each other. And then there's a creature on the ground, and it looks like some furry thing really cruising fast with some food
So
in its
yes,
mouth.
we have two characters who are arguing, and then in the middle of their argument, a creature jumps through a nearby bush and like passes between them. Okay, so this was the
Mm-hmm.
moment that we had. Now, the question is that we had a line of dialogue where a character says, "Oh, here we go again with that," like that kind of like, "Oh, we've been here 100 times" kind of argument, like just to show that the two characters are old friends, right? Not this again, like that kind of thing. And they get interrupted by the creature jumping through the bush, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
question was, do we do the panel before not this again
Uh,
in an extra panel beforehand, then show the creature smash through the bush, and then the other character being like, "What?" Big question mark balloon, right?
okay.
Or do we have the character say, "Not this again"? Creature smash through the bush, and what? Right now,
Uh-huh.
the discussion happened because this character's pose, right? Let me put this in red. Suggests that their pose is in relation to this moment here, where the creature is jumping through the bush, right? It's clearly dodging, right?
Hmm.
Whereas this character is looking at this character, but saying what, right?
Sure.
When they should be looking down at this character saying what.
It's like
So,
they are participating in different aspects, different moments.
mm-hmm. And this is one of those things that gets me really excited about making comics is that we decided not to use that first panel at all because one, it creates an extra beat in the storytelling that I think both of us agreed that like it slowed things down a little too much. But what got me very excited is it capitalizes on this notion of, yes, this pose is in relation to a part of the story that happens after this first line of dialogue, right? But it doesn't happen that long after, right? Oh, not this again, dash, dash, exclamation point, jumping through the bush. It's like a second later. So the
Mhm.
dialogue, which we're going to read first, right? This is read first. So that is implying that the pose happens after, right? And then there's a bit of ambiguity with the second character who's looking at the first character and but reacting to the creature jumping through the bush. But that would also work in that it could be that our second character looked down at the creature, then looked up at their friend and said, "What?" Right? It can happen both ways. There's like an
Mhm.
ambiguity there. But if we were to break this into like a lot of times I see it happening where certain cartoonists or beginning cartoonists maybe well, I don't want to place this as a value judgment. There's a number of cartoonists who feel that comics is a series of snapshots, right? Like if you can't shoot it in real life as discrete single static moments, then you're not doing it right. And that's fine. I've seen comics that work just fine that way. Me personally, I get excited about this particular kind of storytelling because it's something that only comics can do. And it's not that I'm saying that comics is somehow should have any kind of sense of exceptionalism, although it is my favorite medium. But if we're going to use it, why not use what makes what it can do better than other things, right? So, for instance, a musical number, right? Kind of hard to do in comics. Is as a matter of fact, very hard to do in comics. Film does it great, right? And I'm not begrudging them that. You see what I'm saying? Like
Mm.
they have their advantages. Let's lean on our advantages sometimes. And so what we have here is, let's see, use another color to see if I can emphasize this. This would be like, oh, darker blue. This part, nope, let's do green. Maybe that'll stand out a little bit better. This part of the panel is like the first second. This part is the second second, third second, fourth second, right? In one drawing.
That's a lot of moments.
I love that. You know, like I love it when you can do that in comics. I'm not saying, like I said, this isn't something where I feel like Zach and I deserve an Eisner for coming up with this particular moment. It's actually kind of a cheap gag, but it was brought to my attention how we had a moment of concern of, do we need to think of this as two static moments, or can we compress it into one, right?
Yeah, well, and the thing is, like, can you compress it to one? Is you could observe, does the moment communicate? So you can put this in front of an audience and see if if your desired reaction is happening, and also ask questions like, so what do you think happens here? Why do you think that?
Right. Yep. Right. And if you were really thinking like very literal about imagery and how, you know, like not thinking about the poetic aspect of comics, one would argue that, wait a minute, when the creature's jumping through the bush, it's already well past the characters, right? How could she still be so surprised in this box here if he's already well beyond them, right? Like that kind of like, it's that elasticity of the storytelling that I just enjoy so much. So anyway,
Right.
that was a lot.
No, well, hold on. I think there's a couple other things to highlight there.
Okay.
Where, there's like, you think about like why that works. And then we mentioned how it'd be neat to have more research for this. And I think there's probably a thread. I did a little bit of searching while you're describing this, but we covered like the Gestalt principles. And I think that may be a foundation through which a lot of like you could examine like why are these things communicating? Like how is the reader assembling the narrative? And like, and my hypothesis is that if you test this super moment panel, that it probably reads well, right? And you would probably hear your audience saying things that totally are way more information than happens like literally is being depicted, as far as putting in like motivations and reactions and like extra words, what people are saying and doing, that little animal that's stealing some food, getting, you would get a lot of like a couple of paragraphs, I would guess, of description, because there are so many moments that in there. And my bet is that those moments are reading well enough. And then the trick would be is like, what context is needed to set that panel up to land the desired effect from the moment, right? So the setup and punchline kind of thing, because in my experience, it's hard to do. Well, it's doable, right? There's lots of single panel comics that show you how to do a setup and punchline all in one spot, right? So they're a good guide to super moments, I think. But if you make like a multi-panel page of lots of super moments, it's hard to have all that stuff land. And also, it takes that setup context to probably get the greatest benefit out of all those things happening in that panel.
Agreed. Yes, you definitely, you don't want to just have 24 pages of punchline, right? You want to have like setup, and you want to have some breaks in between there. You want to give the audience to have time to laugh at the thing, right? Like you've seen, if you ever watched like a sitcom where there's like a live audience, or watch a stand-up comic, they'll give a few seconds for the audience to like rest on that moment and laugh at it and enjoy it. They don't just like barrel into the next thing, right? There's a rhythm to these things. But yeah, that's just something that I get excited about when I see it, and it's something I try to look for opportunities to do that. And when it happens, I'm delighted by it, even if it's something simple like a little gag like that. Comics is static images in sequence, but you can also nest sequences within the images.
Totally can. Another thing is tapestries, tapestry style storytelling that show like epic battles and all that, and they're full of super moment things. Like this all couldn't happen in this way because there's so many things happening in at the same time. So that's I don't know. I think a neat place to go explore as well, to examine how did people pull off those kind of things. And I don't know. I keep using the word super moment. I don't know if that's a thing.
No, that's a term that I use. I mean, I don't
Okay.
know. I probably heard it from somebody else.
Cool.
But yeah, like
All right. Makes sense.
it's like the biggest nesting doll. Right? Is it like a nesting doll panel? Maybe. We'll consult with some other comics eggheads and see if we can figure out what the heck to call this situation. But in the meantime, I think we did a podcast, Rob.
Yeah, I think we did, Jerzy. That was fun. Thank you.
Man, thank you. All right. Well, we record the show every week, Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central Time in the United States. We stream live on YouTube and then later on collect it as a podcast at patreon.com/leanintoart. And on the channel, if you're watching the YouTube video on this channel, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. More social links are coming in a second. In the meantime, I have been Jerzy Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jerzy Drozd on Instagram.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on the gram.
On the gram. Okay. Well, see everybody. Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right, I'm going to shut the stream off. Thanks, everybody.
Yep, thanks for hanging out.